Today is Wednesday, November 17th, 2021, as the two trials are that we are facing across this country, Kyle Rittenhouse and the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery. As they are taking place, we have come to the point where we are seeing the absurdity smeared in our faces. Right before our eyes, we are seeing the work of white supremacy, almost as if it's a game. Let's discuss this today. We begin this morning with On the Clock with Georgia Ford.
There was a lot of criticism over the internet after people saw what happened inside of the courtroom as the jury moved to deliberate on the Rittenhouse trial. There is a clip we'll show you here in just a moment where you can see Rittenhouse drawing out numbers, basically selecting the jurors who are going to deliberate on his verdict. Take a look at this.
Let's take the strike the jurors as necessary. All of the jurors' numbers have been exhibited to the defendant, I believe, and they're paper clipped together now. And then please put them in the tumbler, and the bailiff will rotate it, and then the defendant will draw out 6 of the numbers.
Do you want me to leave them as is, Judge? Or
no, just separate them and. Parting, as they say, is such sweet sorrow. You've been wonderful jurors, and we couldn't have asked for a higher quality jury, better jurors, more attentive jurors, more prompt jurors. And
now I've covered a lot of trials, and never have I seen a defendant able to draw numbers deciding the jurors in which will decide their own fate. Ben, we continuously through the Rittenhouse trial, we've seen some very bizarre legal decisions made by the judge, including the language that could be used. I think that was one of the first red flags that we noticed in this trial. The judge not allowing prosecution to refer to the two deceased as victims, but only allowing them to be referred to as rioters or protesters. And now in this latest development, I mean, it feels like Rittenhouse in some cases is being coddled.
That's right. It's almost it's absurd, Georgia, to see the carpet being rolled out for this defendant. And here's the thing. I've heard several attorneys argue that the manner in which the judge is behaving now is the manner in which judges should behave in general. This is such a stark contrast to what we are accustomed to, particularly in the Black community, because I've not seen a Black person with a speeding ticket get treated as nicely as Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah. And then now in his case, I mean, he is accused of murdering 2 people and injuring another. The judge even dismissed one of the charges, the lower level charges, right, which he would likely be convicted on, and that's so right. It is when you also juxtapose this to the trial that's happening in Brunswick for the 3 men who are accused of killing Ahmaud Arbery. While there's parallels, there's also differences. But what I'm seeing turn out to be the same is a system that gives these men the confidence that they can go out in the world and kill people and get away with it. Even right. When you look at the jury selection in the Arbery trial, 11 white jurors, 1 Black juror, and the judge in that case seems like he has a little more reason, because he admitted that there was something flawed about that process, but he didn't do anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Georgia, here we are. The hope of justice is based on the goodwill of the jurors, because I think any good faith actor looking at what's happening in the Rittenhouse trial would be able to say that this is a farce, that this is a dog and pony show. In fact, it's a kabuki theater meant to insult us. What this judge is doing is meant to insult the mindset of all of us that are fighting for justice and liberation. And I think any objective observer would see that. And this is what we're hoping the jurors would be, objective observers. But, you know, I don't know. We'll see what they decide shortly.
And in in the trial for the three men who killed Ahmaud Arbery, the prosecution has now rested their case. And we know that probably tomorrow, I believe, Ben, about 200 or more Black pastors are going to be taking a stand outside of the courthouse there after the defense asked for Black pastors to be removed and banned from inside of the courtroom.
That's right. That's right. And so that's coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow there's about 200. And quite frankly, Georgia, I expect even more pastors because once that call went out, once there was a direct challenge to Black pastors, we knew that this was going to happen. So we expect 200 or more to be there tomorrow.
You know, and while we're following both of these trials, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, here in Minnesota, the developments are starting to come out as we prepare for the Kimberly Potter trial. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But tomorrow, I know you're headed out to Georgia. Is there anything that you're expecting? Do you think that the defense is going to try to use this again as a mistrial?
You know, absolutely. But we have seen the judge in this particular case, in the Arbery case, grow weary with this particular defense attorney who is putting on a dog and pony show, even above and beyond what the defendant's other attorneys want. I want to be sure that the attorney who is calling for all of the Black pastors to be removed is anathema to everyone that's involved. That said, we do expect him to try again because of all of the pastors that are showing up. I just spoke with Cliff Albright from Black Voters Matter. His team is going there. Of course, Jamal Harrison Bryant and all the pastors, Benjamin Crump, Al Sharpton, they will all be there. And I'll be pulling up as well.
Absolutely. Well, I know you're following a story this morning as well.
Right. Georgia, we're looking at the I want to kind of juxtapose the two absurdities. One is Joe Manchin and the other is Mitch McConnell. And they're having a particular conversation that I think should be concerning to anyone who is concerned about our environment whatsoever. Senator Joe Manchin was at a hearing on energy prices, and he wanted to make sure that everyone knows the following, that he said, quote, "I can tell you the coal market in West Virginia has never been hotter." Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell is accusing Democrats of a holy war, saying that they have a plan to build back Beijing in a very xenophobic fashion. But I want to unpack the substance of it, because underneath it, it is a push to move us further away from doing what we need to do on the environment. Let's take a look at this clip from Joe Manchin.
And I can tell you, the coal market in West Virginia has never been hotter. They cannot produce enough coal for the demand in the world. U.S. coal exports in the second quarter of this year jumped to 20.6 million tons, a more than 50% increase from the same time frame last year.
American families don't want Washington politicians waging a holy war on fossil fuels in the first place. They can't afford that nonsense. But it's even more absurd that Democrats' top-down schemes would just increase China's wealth and dominance all along the way. They don't have some smart master plan to invest in Americans' future. They've got a plan to build back Beijing.
So notwithstanding the xenophobic nature of the last sentence, right, what we have here, Georgia, is a conversation that's happening between the most powerful Republican in the country, which is Mitch McConnell, and arguably the most powerful Democrat in the country, because we just came through an entire season of Joe Manchin controlling the entire conversation around the infrastructure debate and voting rights. That said, here's the conversation that's being had. You have the leading Democrat saying coal is the way to go. It's the best thing happening in West Virginia. And you have the Republican leader saying the Democrats are waging war on fossil fuels and on. We are moving our country further and further away from the necessary conversation about renewable energies and about taking care of our environment. And our two top political parties in this country are not only oblivious, they are engaging in conversations that are going to intentionally sabotage our ability to do something to preserve our environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we are getting closer and closer to this fork in the road. Do you want to make money, or do you want to have an earth to live on? And until people really start understanding, and when I say people, I'm talking about the political leaders who are arguing over basically the lesser of two evils, right? Until they start to prioritize the earth instead of money, we're going to continue to see the disasters that we've seen with the wildfires, with the flooding, with, you know, all of these different environmental issues, the oil spills. We're destroying our earth. And we've talked so much on the show about how the wealthy probably don't care because they have enough money to go live on Mars, you know. But for those of us who don't, you know, we need to not only think about the renewable energies and stop thinking about the profitability, but we also need to, I think, speak to our indigenous brothers and sisters about the way in which they were preserving the earth. And there are some practices, even recently I learned about controlled burning that was happening that would actually help mitigate those outbreaks of the wildfires we would see. And so the fact that that has been outlawed, the government went through and outlawed indigenous people from being able to do that. And that's why we see these huge wildfires, because no one's going through every, you know, so often and burning the land in a good way that helps cultivate the soil in the land for growth and so that it's not dry, right? But the government wants to control it all as though it knows best, and it just feels like we're headed nowhere fast.
Yeah. And here's the punchline, right? The government controlling it all at the benefit and for the benefit of major corporations. You think of all of the different industries that have a stranglehold on our entire political structure. It would be easier for us to perhaps get to Mars than it would be for us to break away from the energy industry. These major corporations that have a stranglehold on every aspect of our, so much so that they're able to take journalists and imprison them. I'm referring to a story that we'll unpack at another time, but the kind of grip that these corporations have, it's not only on our political system, but it's drenching now into complete and utter control over our destiny as it pertains to this earth. For us to go back and do things properly, we really have to consider the nature of the people who control all the levers of power. And I see it manifested mostly in people like Joe Manchin and Mitch McConnell.
It'd be interesting too to dissect campaign dollars and see what energy companies are funding which politicians. You know, because a lot of times we know that influences the issues that these political leaders advocate on.
Absolutely. It's the most obvious and legal form of bribery. And it is the biggest joke that our American politicians are for sale. The highest bidder, who can give the most money. And right now, it's not the people. The people, we don't have the resources to buy politicians the way ExxonMobil does.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, even looking at manufacturers, the companies that make cars, we have the technology to have 100% electric cars. But will the manufacturers make the switch when it's cheaper to continue producing cars that run the same way that they've always ran? right? And so to make a huge industry shift like that, it's going to cost somebody, right? And so
Right,
nobody
right.
wants to foot the bill. And so I feel like there's also a bit of hot potato that's being
Yeah,
played. Everybody's trying to pass the buck to the next person because at the
right.
end of the day, we know what's right for the environment, but somebody's got to pay a cost in order to shift these industries so that they're in a line with renewable energies, and nobody wants
Yeah,
to bite the bullet. Nobody wants it to affect their bottom line. They want somebody else to lead on it. They want somebody else to pave the way for them.
that's right.
And so there's also things that could be done though in terms of tax write-offs. I don't know if you remember when Obama was in office, there was this push to get, all these older cars off the road.
Yeah.
And
Cash for
you got,
clunkers.
yeah, you got a tax
Yeah.
incentive. If you traded in your car or, but it helped also just even for optics, all of these rust buckets, right? That
Right.
that probably were extremely terrible for the earth, right? It not only was for optics, it was also for the environment. But now we're in this place where people can't afford the cars that are better for the earth.
Yeah.
And so how can we do a big push to get people to either, be able to afford it or get a write-off or something? There's got to be
Well,
something.
so I'm reminded it's a different category of the conversation. I know we're talking about the environment, but I'm thinking about on economic policy. There are volumes of books. In one in particular, I'm thinking about John Rawls' Theory of Justice. We know what to do. We know how to resolve issues like poverty. We also know how to resolve issues like what we're doing on the environment. Here's the gag, Georgia, with the cash for clunkers, that became the biggest weapon in the arsenal of the Republican Party for their political fodder. And this is what they do. They will take all of the best ideas and they water it down to something that becomes milquetoast, something that's ineffective, something like this watered down infrastructure bill, something like Joe Manchin is there to make sure that we don't actually get enough progress. Why? Because like you said, Georgia, we need to look at all of the private industry, all of the coal companies, all the fossil fuel industry companies that are pouring money into his campaign, as well as that of Republicans.
And what does that mean for them? Because when there is a push to switch things over and advance the industry and change consumption, some of those
That's right.
businesses are going to go out of business.
And that's why they're buying themselves time. See, this is applicable in every industry. I'm thinking now of the marijuana industry and the tobacco industry. These private companies are using the government to slow down the process long enough so that these major corporations can get the advantage in the industries. And it's the same thing there, Georgia, when we talk about this transition, because we're going to have to eventually get there or else we are going to destroy ourselves. Now, I want to put one quick caveat here. I think we need to really have a conversation about the fact that some of the people in this conversation are okay with us destroying ourselves. While you and I are now kind of talking about the nuance of how we can get some policy implemented, we look at the conversation between Mitch McConnell and Joe Manchin, and they're talking about how we can get even more oil, how we can use even more coal. So we are dealing with some sociopaths that I think are willing to pass that hot potato that you mentioned. They're willing to pass the hot potato of the last generation to the next generation. They're betting on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think a part of this conversation too, and you start thinking about like those renewable energies in different ways to preserve the earth, like we purchased a building, we have solar panels on the roof of it. We don't even know how to use it. And so I think the other side of the coin here is changing consumption and building awareness for the average consumers, everyday people, because some of these tools and resources are at our fingertips. Some of them we can afford. And there's ways that collectively we can work together. Like right now, we're not occupying that space, but those solar panels could still be producing energy that's stored in, I think, like some kind of a battery that then that energy can be distributed to other people or other buildings. right? And
Georgia,
so
I know a
even
guy.
yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm saying I know a guy because you're right that we could get that connected. Holler at me after the show. We get that because those small steps, those are things that I think we can begin to enrich our community. You're absolutely right. It has to be top down and bottom up. And we as individuals do have that individual responsibility, and those individual responsible actions can form a greater collective action.
Yeah, and there's so many empty lots. You know, you could start to fill some of them with solar panels. And when you also look at single parent homes or people who are in poverty, right? How much would it help them to have a free electricity bill? Right. So, I mean, there's so many different things that we could be doing. But at the top, yes, it does start there because they're leading on this issue, and the decisions that they make ultimately will affect consumers. But we have to have better awareness and knowledge on how to utilize the resources that are already at our fingertips.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I want to take a look at a story that we've been following for over, I think, a week now in Savage, Minnesota, at Prior Lake High School. There was a video that went viral of a young girl attacking another young girl and using racial slurs. So just in advance, this footage may be triggering for some. The language is offensive, but I do want you guys to take a look at this because I don't want to water down. And there's nothing I can say to describe what's in this video that will give you an understanding of the tone and the level of hatred and violence, really, that's being targeted at a 14-year-old Black girl. Take a look. Hundreds of students gathered outside Prior Lake High School Thursday afternoon to demand that this student be expelled for her racist remarks.
You dark-ass nigger. Dark-ass chocolate bar. Get the fuck out of here.
No, I'm trying to fucking get anybody because nobody likes niggers.
No one likes niggers.
And if you watch the full 1-minute video, you'll notice her racial slurs escalate into this.
Fucking kill yourself right this time. Do it fucking right.
Please,
cut deep enough. Cut deep enough this time.
Please,
or fucking tie the rope higher. Like, what the fuck, bro?
The girl who was being attacked in the video was 14-year-old Naya, who spoke up during the protest.
I have had to deal with racism in my city for as long as I can remember. It's disgusting. It needs to stop. Now. And I am so thankful for every single one of you for showing up.
Yes. Love you, Naya! Yeah.
I love y'all so much. Thank you so much.
You
don't understand how much this means to me and my family. This is where we can create real change.
Yes.
This happens here, right now. I'm so thankful for every single one of you.
Yes.
We got your back!
Yes, we got your back!
Students were also joined by organizers and activists from the Twin Cities.
Y'all got a teacher named Sarah Bernard? Yeah! Sarah Bernard is done for. She's no longer working here. We are demanding that she is fired or that she resigns, but we prefer her being fired.
She should not teach again!
She defended the little racist white bitch, Jada. That's what it is. If you 12 and you racist, or you 30 and you racist. And this teacher and this institution upheld it and defended her. When they prodded a young Black queen to the point of trying to take her own life, one of your teachers stood and defended that. You don't work here no more, and if we see you at the school, it's over.
You know, it's sad that Minnesota continues to make national news because of the racial ignorance that's happening in our state. It's sad that a 14-year-old girl can't just go to school without being called the N-word and being told to go kill herself. You know, one of the things that the white child said, she said, make sure you do it right. She said, cut deeper next time. She said, take the rope and put it up higher next time. And when she said that, I started to visualize lynchings.
Yeah.
And just, the connection in her words and her racism that is ingrained in her, and the racism that our ancestors had to fight against. I spoke with the chief of police, the Savage chief of police, on, I believe it was Monday. He said he is investigating this incident. In Minnesota, there is a law that prohibits someone from encouraging or advising someone to kill themselves or harm themselves. And so she did violate that law. She potentially could be charged. But I'm just curious. They say justice delayed is justice denied. And so if this chief of police is considering charging her, he has the video footage. What is he waiting for?
Right. Georgia, I hadn't seen the entire clip there. And to address your point, I think he's trying to wait to see if he's ready for the backlash. Because while we can see that video footage very clearly that she did encourage this young woman to kill herself, we're dealing with such an absurd moment in politics that I guarantee you the calculus that chief is doing right now is whether or not he's ready for the response from the conservative movement that is going to line up behind this little girl, this little white girl, and support her to the end, because they are supporting Kyle Rittenhouse to the end. So let's be sure there's no limit to the kind of support that this young woman is going to get from the opposition. And I believe that that's what that officer is considering, if nothing else.
Well, I think being here in Minnesota and hearing not only Naya, but Ben, that rally where we heard the different speakers, there were dozens of students who came forward and said, I attend a school in, the suburbs, and we hear the N-word from students. We hear the N-word from teachers. The level of racism that these kids are exposed to and experience and have to endure, there something has to be done. Especially when you have the confidence to record yourself doing it and upload it to social media for the world to see, and to your point, it's like, but we've created a system that has given individuals with that type of hatred and racism in their heart to be confident. Because the system will drag its feet to protect them. The system will outlaw certain words to be used so that narratives can be favorable to them. The system will dismiss charges, right? But when the shoe's on the other foot, it doesn't go that way. And so ultimately, we're still living in a society where white people have the privilege to be innocent until proven guilty, and Black people don't.
That's right. All the way to the point of, I mean, it's the absurdity that smacks us in the face. And I'm looking at the video of the little girl, Babatunde, if you don't mind running that B-roll of her again, because isn't that white supremacy just adorable? I mean, it's the Goldilocks Nazi, right? It is a level of evil and bigotry that's served up in a package that could look like Disney. She could be on Kids Bop. This is where white supremacy and this level of hatred and bigotry, and it's to the point of murder and encouraging suicide. We're dealing with a new level. Like, this kind of evil has always been here,